President Edgar Lungu has sparked a rare and public dispute between his family and the state, culminating in President Hakainde Hichilema ending the national mourning period. The standoff over the repatriation and burial of the late president has raised questions about legacy, national identity, and political tensions in Zambia. To help us unpack the historical and political significance of these developments, we're joined by Zambian historian Dr. Sishuwa Sishuwa. Dr. Sishuwa, thank you for making time for us on this Friday. How are you? Dr. Sishuwa, can you hear us? All right, I think there's a bit of a challenge there in terms of technicalities. We're going to try and get a hold of Dr. Sishuwa again. Don't know if we should drop the line. But this very developing story. One moment we are crossing live to Lanseria Airport with Michael Mbewe saying things are in process for the late Edgar Lungu's body to be repatriated back to Zambia. Next thing, the family holds that, and now other developments where the president has decided to end the national mourning period. So let's find out in terms of how we can unpack this on a historical level with Dr. Sishuwa Sishuwa. Doctor, thank you for joining us, and good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Asanda.
We appreciate you making time for us. How do you interpret this standoff between the Lungu family and the government of Zambia when we look at it in terms of the historical political setup of Zambia?
Well, I think there are both immediate factors that led to the failure to resolve the standoff, but also there are long-term factors rooted in the history of the relationship between the two political leaders. When Longu won the 2016 Zambian election, which was a disputed election, Hichilema refused to recognize that election, his victory, because he believed it was the election was stolen from him. And he spent the next 5 years contesting the legitimacy of President Longu, much to the displeasure of the then incumbent. And it was in the context of that relationship that Hichilema was arrested for treason in April 2017 for what many people saw as a minor traffic violation. And that, I think, set the stage for the kind of acrimonious relationship that we saw when Hichilema won the presidency in 2021 after defeating Longu. Because in the 2017 arrest, Hichilema spent about 4 months in detention, and when the matter was taken to court, it was discharged. It was ended prematurely without trial. So after Longu became former president, he complained himself that Hichilema mistreated him, and I think there was a legitimate basis for that complaint. Mm-hmm. The law, for example, provided that the former president is entitled to state benefits such as medical insurance and an annual return ticket to a country of his choice. But Hichilema's administration rejected Lungu's request first in 2022 and then next in 2023 when he approached the government to say, I want to go to South Africa for medical review. The government said, we don't have money, and on the second occasion, they simply didn't give him any reason. And you have to remember, this is a legal entitlement for somebody who had retired from politics. And it was in the context of that Lungu came back to politics in October 2023, and the government then responded by firstly, grabbing his political party from him and giving it to other surrogates, and then members of Lungu's family, including the wife, were arrested, as well as his children, for suspected corruption. What many people saw as an attempt to go for Lungu's family, rather than for Lungu himself, who enjoyed immunity from prosecution. And the government didn't have a sufficient majority in parliament to lift his immunity so that he could stand trial for corruption. And then in 2024, the Constitutional Court that had given Lungu the right to stand in 2021 election reversed his judgment after Hichilema fired 3 judges who had ruled in favor of Lungu in the last case, and then appointed his own judges who ruled in what many people saw as Hichilema's favor. then in January this year, Lungu escaped from the country to come to South Africa for medical review because he had a long-standing health condition. And it was in that context that, he, after 4 months or so of being in South Africa, he died in June this year. So the relationship was very bad between Hichilema and Lungu. So by the time he was dying, the state was not providing for his medical expenses in South Africa. The family, as I said, were undergoing several trials for corruption and other cases. And when the state then, following his death, offered to repatriate his body to Zambia, the family rejected because they felt, we are going to take back the body to Zambia the same way he came to South Africa as a private citizen. It was that context then that facilitated the discussion that were held between the family and the Zambian government last week to say, can we come to an agreement? And I think many people were pleased when they saw that the two parties came together and saying the body will be repatriated to Zambia on Wednesday this week, which was the day before yesterday. Mm-hmm. They agreed to a number of commitments. But then on Wednesday itself, what we saw was the Longu family saying we are not taking the body to Zambia because the Zambian authorities have violated the commitments that were made prior to today. They cited two of those commitments that they felt were breached. One was the requirement that the Zambian government communicated to the Zambian public that the body of the former president will be received at the airport in Lusaka by people who were invited by the Zambian government to be at the airport. The Longu family expressed their concern about that. They said, look, this was the former president, yes, but he was also a leader of the main opposition party. So his supporters should have the freedom to come to the airport to receive his remains if they have the interest and the time. There's no need to restrict who could welcome the corpse. And what was more concerning for the family was the fact that the government unilaterally decided who to invite to be at the airport. The second concern or grievance that the family expressed to the Zambian authorities was that in the original agreement, the plan for the body on receipt at Kenneth Kaunda International Airport was simply for military honors to be conducted, after which the body proceeded to lie in state at the late former president's residence. But the Zambian authorities, when they released the program, showed that there will be a church service conducted at the airport, within the airport building. And the family said, look, we didn't agree to this. We don't even know who is going to conduct this church service. We don't know which church service is going to preside over the ceremony. And they felt that those unilateral decisions on the part of the Zambian side betrayed the spirit of the agreement that was reached. And there were other concerns. And they said, for these and other reasons, we are not traveling to Zambia as earlier scheduled. So last evening, when President Hichilema addressed the nation at 7 p.m., what many Zambians expected was that he would address the grievances that the Longu family had communicated to make sure that the remains of the late former president were taken back to Zambia. Unfortunately, he didn't even touch on their concerns. When he took to the national screen, he made two pronouncements. One was that he was cancelling the period of national mourning because he had extended it until Monday next week, which was the day set for burial. But he said, we have to return to normalcy, and as a result, I'm cancelling the national mourning effective 7 p.m. today, meaning last night. And then secondly, he said the doors remain open. And what was suggesting, if the Longu family wishes to approach the government is open to having further conversation, but it gave an indication that the government won't push this matter further unless the Longu family approach the government. And then finally he said the government is committed to ensuring that the remains of the former president are buried in Zambia. And now I must say here that the Zambian authorities have no right to determine where Lungu's family would bury their loved one. They have the right to bury him in South Africa. They have the right to bury him in any country, including en masse, if they have the resources to take him there. Ultimately, the Zambian authorities will have to work with the Lungu family if they want the remains to be taken to Zambia.
So on that first announcement by the President Hichilema saying that I'm ending the mourning period, why do you think that was the decision, and was it a necessary step to take at this point?
I think there were two motivations behind the decision. The first is that there was a sense that it was a reaction rather to the decision taken by the Lungu family not to take the body to Zambia. I think the president was very unhappy with that decision and felt that the government had done what they could to get the body to Zambia and they had extended the period of national mourning for the second time, because initially it was for 7 days and then it was extended to Monday next week, as I said earlier. So I think when the Lungu family decided not to travel, I think the reaction was to cancel that period of national mourning, because the people in Zambia who felt, life had to go on. There were businesses, programs of entertainment nature that could not be undertaken throughout the period of national mourning. And the critics say that affected the economy. So I think that Hichilema felt that he needed to give in to those concerns. But secondly, the government is also keen, to proceed with its own programs. Hichilema is pushing for a constitutional amendment bill that critics say is meant to ensure that it positions him in a very good position in relation to Zambia's elections slated for August next year. That constitutional amendment bill that is introducing is meant to be tabled, is scheduled to be tabled in Parliament on Tuesday next week, which was the day after the burial. And so I think the government decided that, look, we need to really focus on the politics as well, and this national mourning is really affecting our capacity to do so. So I think it was political but partisan considerations, as well as the frustrations resulting from the decision of the Longu family to cancel the travel on Wednesday that prompted those decisions.
So the president saying the door remains open to the Lungu family. Historically, how have Zambians reconciled the personal and national identities of former leaders, and maybe what the family needs to consider?
Well, historically, there have been a number of presidents who have died in office. For example, two presidents, that's President Levi Mwanawasa in 2008 and President Michael Sata, died outside the country. When their remains were returned to Zambia, they served as a moment of unity, across the political divide. What I think is particularly unique about this instance is two things. One is the fact that Longu is the first former president to die outside the country, but also one who didn't have a very good relationship with his successor. So that context, I think, is very important to understanding how unique this moment is. And at the time he was dying, the state had withdrawn his pension. Again, that serves as an important backdrop to understanding the acrimony between the two parties and the polarization that his death has generated in the aftermath. The other key point I think to notice is that in the previous cases of leaders who died outside the country, the state, as the Longu family suggested, did not put this condition to say ABC should come to the airport. Everybody was really welcome to come to the airport. But in this case, what we saw is the state introducing this kind of limitations, which even from the African culture point of view is unheard of. I must say also very quickly that the fundamental issue here that the family of Lungu says, before Lungu died, he told them that they don't want Hichilema at his burial, were he to die, for example. And I think that the danger with that kind of position is that Hichilema feels slighted. He wants to preside over the burial. He feels that as the head of state, really, and this is a state funeral that is coming up, he should preside over that. So is the Hichilema's failure to step aside as per the wishes of the Longu family in terms of presiding over this funeral has created this kind of this polarization that we see between the two parties, because on the one hand, There's no law in Zambia that says the president of the country should preside over the state funeral of his predecessor or anybody else for that matter. And so the Longu family is entitled to simply say, look, we are the mourning family, we are the beloved family here, and we are respecting the wishes of the former president, that you should not have anything to do with his funeral because of the bad blood between you two. On the other hand, the Hichilema supporters are saying, look, he's the head of state, and I think he's entitled to presiding over this matter, especially if it's a state funeral. That has really created this kind of difficulties that we are seeing now.
Is this an embarrassment for the president, the current president, Hichilema, and how may this deepen those existing divisions politically?
I think that the current impasse, if Longu if it's unresolved, will have long-running, effects into the future. Take, for example, if Longu is buried in South Africa, for example, it would be the first time that a former head of state is buried in exile because of the refusal by an incumbent to step aside as expressed by the family to say, we don't want you present at this person's burial as per his wish, for example. The danger is that going into an election next year, that could create a situation where the opposition, for example, could use that decision to bury Longu in exile for campaign. They could say, look, if you want Longu to come back home and rest in peace, you have to vote out the person who made it impossible for him to be buried at home. So I think it was really in the interest of the Zambian government to make sure that they come together with the Longu family, they agree and say, what is it that is needed? What are your concerns? What are your grievances that can enable us to get Longu buried at home? South Africa, I think, has played a very, very important and neutral role in this conflict because they believe that this is the domestic matter between the Zambian government and the Longu family to resolve. And so Pretoria has taken a principled position, you would say, on this matter, because if you remember, Asanda, there was a case of an Angolan general some time back. He belonged to the opposition, and he was brought here for medical review, and he died here. The government wanted to claim his body. The family said, no, we have control over this matter, and that issue went to court. And the South African court decided that the family had the final say on the matter. So even the Zambian government should have taken clues from that and say, how can we make sure that we address the grievances of the Longu family to make sure that his remains rest at home? The kind of antagonistic, attitude that they have taken, the refusal by the president to do the right thing, if he has no interest whatsoever in this matter, it should have been fairly easy for him to step aside and delegate to the vice president or any member of the state to simply say, can you preside over this funeral as per the wishes of the former president's family, or indeed the late former president himself, and that this matter could have been resolved. That we have seen this elsewhere. Donald Trump, for example, when he was president, didn't go to the funeral of John McCain because McCain said he didn't want Trump there, and he stepped aside and sent other people there. What was so difficult for the Zambian authorities to do the same?
How should the opposition Patriotic Front be approaching this situation as far as balancing between the family and the national interests as well as public expectations?
Well, I think that this is not a matter for the Patriotic Front. I think you have to understand that there's a family here, and the opposition Patriotic Front, which were the party of the late former president, as well as the Zambian government. The dispute primarily is between the family of the late former president and the Zambian government. The Patriotic Front, his party, I think, is secondary to this dispute. In my view, what should have happened is for these parties, that is the family of the late president and the Zambian government, to come together as they did. And when they reached that agreement earlier in the week, everybody was very happy to say this matter is finally being resolved. And many people even said, we hope that both parties will commit to their side. But I think in the end, the Zambian government, reneged on some of those commitments that were insincere. And that prompted the Longu family, I think, to make the decision that they made. We have to understand, Asanda, that, for Zambians, the ordinary Zambians, they have lost very little. The family that has lost is really the Longu family. They're the one that is grieving. And it is their interest that should be taken into account. That should be in our consideration, because they've lost a loved one. Yes, we may have lost a former president. Yes, we may have lost somebody who governed our country, or rather, the Patriotic Front may have lost a leader. But ultimately, I think, the body belongs to the former president, because he was their family member, he was their father, he was their whatever relative. And in the end, those parties, the family and the government, should really have come together as they did and remained true to the spirit of the agreement that was reached, because any departure from that was always going to produce the outcome that we have seen.
Do you think President Hichilema needs to issue an apology to the Lungu family? The family had stated that there was a breach. We also touched on that in terms of what was the agreement between the Lungu family and the government and how that was not adhered to.
I think there are two things that Hichilema could have taken. The first, I saw in the address to the nation yesterday, he apologized to South Africa for what happened at the airport, for example. And I think that could have been extended to the Lungu family to simply say, look, on the part of the government, we have heard your concerns, we have heard your grievances about what was not honored in relation to what was agreed. We apologize for those violations on our part, and we remained committed to ensuring that we work with you to make you feel comfortable enough, because this is a grieving family, So he could have reached out to them in the same spirit that he did to the public of South Africa and people of South Africa, to simply say, we are very sorry. But I think the president has really handled this issue in a very poor way, one would say, because he should have risen above his personal considerations or personal feelings. However aggrieved he might be about what the Longu family did, what was important was for him to understand that it's a family in mourning. They have expressed these grievances to the government, and we need to reach out to them with compassion, with care, and say, we are sorry that you feel this way. What can we do to make you feel better? Including, of course, respecting the grievances, or rather addressing the grievances that they communicated. I think that would have been the correct thing to do. The second thing, I think, would have been to have a team that could negotiate, trusted team that could negotiate with the Lungu family on the side of the Zambian government, for example, to make sure that this matter is resolved. Unfortunately, Zambia is very, very polarized at the moment, and there's a scarcity of voices that enjoy the respect of both parties. I'm aware that there are attempts to get regional leaders like Zimbabwe's Emmerson Mnangagwa, and even leaders from here to intervene in the south and try to help. But you see, the chances of success for any mediator is determined by the trust that both parties retain in that mediator and the sincerity of both parties in relation to the commitments that can be made. The Longu family feels that the trust was breached, and I'm not sure that they will be able to trust the Zambian government going forward to make any further commitments that they can say the Zambian side will honor, because it seems to me that what the family may feel now, that the Zambian side may trick us to simply get the body there, and then they will bulldoze their way once we are on the Zambian side. So I won't be surprised if they make a decision to bury outside the country.
So that's what's likely to happen next then, Doctor?
I suspect it might be the case. I think that they were very willing, as I said this week, based on the joint press statement that was shared, to take to Zambia. I must mention that it was a very, very strange joint briefing, that was held. I think it was in Joburg or Pretoria earlier in the week. The Zambian side, for example, represented by the Secretary to Cabinet, read what they understood to be what they had agreed with the Longu family. The Longu family, represented by the former late President Sishuwa Sishuwa, read what they understood to be what they had agreed with the government. There wasn't a joint statement signed by both parties to say this is what we've agreed to resolve this matter and move forward. Everybody, rather both parties, came to the press conference with their own script. I'm not sure that is how the agreement should be reached. But that said, there was a commitment. The spirit was there to say we are taking the body to Zambia. When that was betrayed, it seems to me that the Longu family may decide to bury here or bury elsewhere, for example, and we must acknowledge that they have the right to do so. If they decide to bury in South Africa, South African government this is not a diplomatic issue where the South African government can come in and say, hey, we can't do this. In fact, there was a statement issued by DECO last evening when news circulated in Zambia that the South African government has told the Lungu family to leave, or that said, oh, we won't allow you to bury in South Africa, the Department of International Relations said, no, that's not correct. This is a matter that should be resolved between the Zambian government and the Lungu family. South Africa is not a party to this dispute. It's a neutral player, which I think is the correct thing to do.
Yeah.
If the Lungu family decide we're going to bury here, the South African government, I think, will not stand in their way.
All right, Doctor, we really appreciate your insight into this. We thank you for your time again, Dr. Sishuwa.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Sishuwa Sishuwa offering a critical insight into the tensions surrounding the late President Edgar Lungu's burial. He is a Zambian historian, and may that former President Edgar Lungu's soul rest in peace. 31 minutes past 7 Central African Time.